So I was born in the 80s and I grew up in the 90s. And in those days, there was still a lot of positive science fiction, a lot of optimistic science fiction. I guess left over from earlier eras where the future was bright and shiny and gleaming and humanity was colonizing the solar system and the galaxy. And there was still some of that stuff being made and being published. Although, even at that time, there was a lot of the darker, more pessimistic science fiction already. You know, the dystopian science fiction, the zombie apocalypse and post-apocalyptic type stuff. But there was still a lot of positive science fiction, a lot of optimistic science fiction, and it was possible to be really into that sort of thing, and I was, and a lot of kids were, I think, and you know, and also interested in space stuff, because it wasn't that you know, big of a leap from science fiction to like actual science fact, and being interested in space stuff and rocketry and space exploration and all of that. And you know, things seem to be stuck in a little bit of stagnation with the shuttle program and everything, but things were happening. You know, they were building the International Space Station. That was kind of new, and you know, stuff was going on, and it looked like maybe stuff would keep going on. And I was really into that kind of stuff. And you know, I remember I was on a message board one time, maybe over a decade ago, and just talking about space stuff with a bunch of dudes on the internet. And they would have all been dudes, most likely, although we never even thought about it at the time. Like, this was before my political awakening or anything like that, before my, you know, racial awakening, or any of these guys. Probably there were like a few nut jobs here and there who were woke, so to speak, but everybody discounted them. But we're just on there on some message board talking about space stuff, and some incensed social justice warrior got on to register her disapproval. Well, you're just a bunch of straight white males who want to colonize the future. And I was like, yeah, actually, now that you mention it, that's what we are. And that's what we want to do. And that metaphor, colonize the future, that has stuck with me as kind of like a personal motto ever since then, because it's just such a beautiful metaphor. Yeah, we want to colonize the future, and the future belongs to whoever shows up. And you know, historically, we've had a very slow reproductive strategy. Eugenic reproductive strategies are slow reproductive strategies, because the only way you can obtain differential reproduction is by, you know, disproportionately suppressing some segment of reproduction, of possible reproduction, right? If you're maximizing reproduction across the board, which some cultures do, and some peoples do, and some reproductive strategies do, then you can't obtain that differential reproduction, that eugenic reproduction. So you have to suppress at least some of that, and that makes eugenic reproductive strategies slower than dysgenic ones in principle and in practice. So we have a very slow reproductive strategy, but if you're increasing the quality of your people, if you're increasing the quality of your civilization over time, you are increasing the habitat for your people, for your civilization, as you become more able and more capable. And increasing it by going into space is, you know, that's a vast increase. Prior generations of Europeans increased their habitat by getting in ships and sailing around the world. And acquiring new habitats in North America and in Australia and Southern Africa. And, there's just a lot more where that came from. There's Mars. There's the asteroid belt. Although, asteroid belt's maybe not an ideal habitat. But there's no reason in principle why we can't colonize most of the solar system and then continue on interstellar, going to other star systems, colonizing the galaxy. Now, I understand all of this is tremendously difficult and technically challenging, and it's expensive, and there may never be a straightforward economic case for doing it. Probably never going to be a straightforward economic case, profit and loss case for doing this, and the reason is because the risks are so high, and the timelines are so long, and the investments are so great that there's just no way to earn a competitive return on investment by doing this. So you're not going to do it for purely economic reasons. Now, that being said, if there's somebody who's willing to lose a large fortune to make it happen, or at least to risk a large fortune, or tie up a large fortune for a long time before realizing a return on investment, they may be able to get their money back. And if they're not able to get their money back, they may be able to get things to a point where it's self-supporting, where those colonies can support themselves and continue to grow over time. And once people are there, once people are established on Mars, if they can support themselves at least and grow their colonies, then it's a going proposition, right? No matter how much money had to be sunk into it to make it happen, or tied up for how long at low rates of return to make it happen, or even lost. Those are all possibilities. So it's very nearly not possible. So it's right on the knife edge of possibility. And it's almost certainly not profitable in a strictly economic sense. You might be able to realize an accounting profit, but you're not going to realize the same returns with that capital in that way that you could realize in other ways. So it's not an accounting profit. It could be an accounting profit, but it's not going to be an economic profit. So it's right in that window where it may be possible. I think it is possible. I'm an optimist. And if it's, we can make it possible is basically my point of view. And, it's just probably not profitable. And so, it's going to take somebody doing it for essentially spiritual motivations because they believe in it. And probably the same for interstellar too, although that's orders of magnitude harder. And we have to do the solar system first before we'll have the infrastructure to go interstellar. So yeah, we can expand our habitat enormously even though we have a slow reproductive strategy, a eugenic reproductive strategy. But we have to defend that strategy against competitors, against dysgenic competitors here on Earth who would overwhelm us with sheer numbers if we're not careful. And that's the situation we're in right now. We're being overwhelmed by sheer numbers by people who practice dysgenic reproductive strategies. And so that's where I think a lot of the pessimism comes from in science fiction, in the darkness and the post-apocalyptic, because we're in a declining civilization. And, even the zombie apocalypse stuff kind of tracks this. We're in a declining civilization. We're besieged by lower IQ, more aggressive competitors who outnumber us. And they're ravenous. They don't create. They only destroy or consume. And, their numbers are multiplying endlessly. And that's kind of, the zombie apocalypse, more or less. They're 80 IQ instead of 40, but it's the same concept. And, that's why I think that mythos, those various pessimistic, dark mythoses have taken off, because they kind of track the challenges and the problems that we're facing as a civilization and as a people right now. And we don't really have the moral or the political tools to deal with those challenges at the moment. We're developing them. It's starting to be put together. It's coming together slowly from the bottom up because our elites and our institutions have failed us. So we're doing it ourselves. And we want to get back to that bright, gleaming, optimistic future where we're spreading across the galaxy, colonizing the future, so to speak. But first, we've got to handle our demons here on this planet. We've got to handle our competitors here on this planet that want to drag us back down into the mud, back down into the primordial ooze, back down into the slime from whence we came, instead of going ever onward and ever upward and improving and expanding. And, even though it's a slow reproductive strategy we're following, that's, the universe is the limit. The universe is the limit, and we can attain greater numbers and greater expanse than any dysgenic or stagnant people or stagnant society or dysgenic society can ever attain, because, once they feast on what's here, then where do they go, right? Once they've consumed us, then what's their food source? How do they support their teeming numbers? They don't. They crash back to the Stone Age or whatever, back to whatever primitive level they can sustain on their own. And, it'd be just a tremendous waste to let that happen. It'd be a tremendous loss, and it wouldn't help anybody out, least of all them. But if we can defend our eugenic reproductive strategy and our eugenic society, and hold our ground and protect our homelands, and start to expand into space, well, I'm not necessarily going to say they're going to share in that, but if we supply that competitive pressure, maybe we can move them along in that direction behind us. Who knows? But it's a beautiful, compelling, thrilling prospect, positive prospect that any one of us can look forward to, and most of us used to look forward to. And we want to get that mythology back, because science fiction is the continuation of heroic Western mythology, right? The conquest and honor and glory, that heroic Western mythical thread projected forward into the future. And we want to make that, reality, and not just reality, but we want to make that history. So, there can be nothing more noble, no goal more noble in my mind, and more adaptive ultimately in the end, because, if we can open up all that tremendous habitat for our species, for our people, for our civilization, and for new branches of civilization, then, that's really a tremendous opportunity, and it's something we shouldn't ignore, and we should really seize and take advantage of.